Hello and welcome to Miniature Adventures. I'm Big Lee, and this week I want to talk about spectacle or stumbling block, the role of beautiful demo games in wargaming. So this week I want to pick up on a question I received in the comments a few days ago. Andy Shaw kindly took the time in the comments on my video on the Broadside show and asked, do you think fantastic tables put off new players, in the vein of I'd never be able to do that on my own? Or do they inspire someone to take on a long-term project to build what is in effect model railway level of table? Well, thank you, Andy. That's a cracking question, and one that really got me thinking. As many of you know, I've talked often about bringing new wargamers into the hobby, or drawing them into historical wargaming from other genres, tempting them over to historicals. And in the past I've also spoken about the issue of gatekeeping in the hobby, those moments where experienced gamers, sometimes unintentionally, make the hobby feel just a little less accessible to newcomers. So today I wanted to dive into this little conundrum and ask the big question: are demo games that deliver eye-watering spectacle good or bad for bringing people into the hobby? Now, my initial gut reaction to Andy's question was pretty straightforward. Personally, I don't find spectacle games off-putting at all. Quite the opposite, in fact. I always feel a little surge of excitement and inspiration when I see those magnificent games at shows. I'm pragmatic enough to understand that those tables aren't a reflection of the average club night, far be it. They're not the norm. They are the pinnacle of what the hobby can look like when you've got the time, the space, and frankly the mad commitment to go all out. And I admire that. It's like turning up at a classic car show. You don't walk away disappointed that you don't own a racing green Aston Martin. You walk away thinking, maybe one day. So when my group, Posties Rejects, put on a demo game at a show, we always try to deliver something that looks great and grabs attention. We also try to keep it grounded. Everything you see on our table is something we might actually use in the shed of war. It's all achievable, practical, realistic terrain and miniatures. But that doesn't mean we don't enjoy or appreciate those games that are the pinnacle of any show season. Far from it, indeed. So before we really get into the meat of this discussion, let's just take a moment to define what I mean by a spectacle game. For me, these are the big, beautiful, jaw-dropping demo games that you see at some wargaming shows. We're talking about tables with thousands of carefully painted figures, terrain that's been scratch-built with obsessive historical accuracy, custom buildings, realistic vegetation, carefully planned layouts, sometimes even lighting or smoke effects. These are the games that stop you in your tracks. You stand there gawping and thinking, blimey, that's a bit special. And they usually draw a bit of a crowd, especially if at big shows like Salute and Partizan, but also at the smaller regional shows where the love and effort are just as strong, even if the tables are a little bit more modest in size. So now we've set the scene, let's turn to the potential downsides. Why would such beautiful demo games be seen as off-putting, or even, dare I say it, detrimental to the health of the hobby? Well, the first thing that comes to mind is the issue of unrealistic expectations. Picture the scene: a new player, maybe fresh from board gaming or fantasy skirmish gaming, wanders into a historical wargame show. They see a 12-foot long table filled with thousands of hand-painted Napoleonic troops marching across lovingly contoured hills towards a hand-built LaHaye Saint made by a scratch from a retired architect. The game has period-accurate signage and a chap in a shako quoting Wellington directing the game. And the newcomer thinks, I can never do that, this is out of my league. And that's a fair reaction, because if you assume that that is what is expected of you, then you are making a mistake. And second, there's a bit of a social angle. Sometimes spectacle games can accidentally give off a whiff of elitism. Now, I don't mean that everyone's being intentionally rude or snobbish, though there's always one or two who confuse passion with history with unwelcome lectures on minute details. But when a demo game is run by a tight-knit group, too busy measuring firing arcs and quoting Clausewitz to notice the public, you can feel a bit, well, unwelcome. And when people feel unwelcome, they often walk away, no matter how impressive the table is. Lastly, and this one's a bit more practical, sometimes spectacle games forget the demo part of demo game. You can have all the beautiful terrain and perfectly painted miniatures in the world, but if no one's explaining what's going on, if there's no signage or interaction, and then it's just a diorama. And that's fine, but it doesn't really demonstrate anything, especially not the fun or the rules, or the fact that you could be doing this too with a few boxes of figures and a kitchen table. Now, having said all of that, let me be absolutely clear. I love a good demo game, I really do. When they're done well, they're not just impressive, they're inspiring. And I think there are at least 5 strong reasons why those big spectacle games are not just good for the hobby, they're absolutely essential. First and foremost, they're inspiring. Nothing sells a hobby like a beautiful example of what's possible. You might not go home and recreate the entire Battle of Leipzig in 28mm, but you might decide to paint up a brigade of Austrians. You might finally get around to building that terrain board you've been planning for months. These games light a little fire in you, and that spark can lead to all sorts of hobby activity. Second, they're brilliant conversation starters. A well-run demo game draws people in and gets them asking questions. What's the battle? What rules are you using? How did you make that river? These are questions that often lead to more profound conversations about history, about modelling techniques and about gaming styles. And before you know it, someone's been talking to you for 20 minutes and you're already planning your first army. Third, these games showcase commitment and passion. Let's not pretend these tables appear overnight. They are the result of months, sometimes years of work, and that's worth celebrating. When you see that much care and craftsmanship on display, it reminds you what the hobby is really about. It's not just pushing toy soldiers around, it's research, modelling, storytelling, artistry, and yes, a bit of nerdy obsession. There's nothing wrong with that. And isn't that why we all love it after all? Fourth, these games encourage the rest of us to raise our game. Not in a competitive or snobby way, I don't think, but in the way that makes you think, I could probably do better with my terrain boards, or that's a good idea, I could copy that. You know, I've walked away from dozens of shows with new ideas, new techniques and a renewed sense of what's possible. These games don't discourage me, they motivate. And finally, big demo games can be a showcase for history itself. The very best historical demo games are more than just pretty. They tell a story. They bring a moment in history to life. A well-constructed game can spark curiosity, invite learning, send people off to look up battles, uniforms or regimental histories. I've had games that led me down rabbit holes into obscure campaigns and forgotten units, and I never knew I wanted to do it. And I know I'm not alone. These games can educate as well as entertain. Now, of course, not every spectacle game hits all of those notes, and I've definitely seen some that miss the mark, either for being too focused on appearance or by forgetting the audience entirely. So if I may be so bold, I'd like to offer 2 gentle suggestions for anyone planning a demo game at a future show. First, and I've talked about this extensively before, signage. Honestly, it makes such a difference. Tell us what we're looking at. What's the battle? What are the rules being used? What scale are the miniatures? Who are you? What club do you belong to? Even a bit of background into the scenario helps. People want to know, and a simple printed sheet or a sign can go a long way to answering their questions. Second, and perhaps most importantly, talk to people. Be welcoming, smile, say hello, invite questions. Show people that you're not just here to show off, you're here to share. Tell them how long the game took to build, point out the easier parts and the shortcuts and the kits you used. And if someone seems interested but overwhelmed, slow down and show them how you can start small. Maybe a skirmish game in 15mm, maybe MDF buildings and pre-painted troops to get going. Bring the barrier down a notch, and you might just be responsible for starting someone's lifelong obsession with wargaming. What better legacy is there? So to bring it all back to Andy's question, do I think spectacle games put people off? No, not when they're done well, not when they're paired with friendliness, openness and a willingness to share the story behind the spectacle. The issue isn't the beauty of the table, it's the attitude of the people around the table. Spectacle doesn't need to be intimidating, it can be inspiring, it can be an invitation. So as always, I want to throw the question out to you. What do you think about big spectacular games at shows? Do you love them or hate them? Have you ever been inspired or perhaps a little bit put off by a display game that went all out? Do you think they showcase the best of our hobby, or do they risk making it feel out of reach? I'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments below, because like most good war games, this is a discussion that's best played out together. So we've got time for a hobby update. Last weekend the rejects were at Broadside in Kent, and as is our tradition, we put on our annual demo game. This year we presented the Battle of Rivoli for 1797. I say we, but in actual fact it was almost entirely the work of Richard, a fellow member of the rejects. He painted all the figures, built the terrain, designed the scenario and acted as umpire for an epic clash that wasn't just a visual treat but a historically rich and tactically engaging experience for the players and onlookers alike. Richard chose to represent the armies and battlefields in 6mm using laser cut MDF miniatures from commissioned figurines. Now these figures give the game an epic scale that larger figures often struggle to capture. The rules used for this game were volley and bayonet, a well established system ideal for large scale battles like Rivoli. We played these rules many times and found them ideal for recreating large Napoleonic encounters. Now, while some of our group focused on the game during the show, a few of us circled the table, speaking to visitors, and many attendees commented on how effective 6mm MDF figures looked for portraying that big battle. When painted and based well, these are perfect. Now, I did make a short video of the game for a closer look at the miniatures and all of Richard's hard work, so please go check that out. I will put a link in the description below. So a very short workbench update. I have been working to try and finish my Cossacks this week, and I made a little bit of progress, although I have to say it's been a very hot week and my operations room has been like an oven in the evening. I'm going to try and get these models finished next week, although I will be spending a whole day with Ray next week because we're going to be working on some of the terrain for the Retreat from Moscow project. We bought a lot of stuff, including a lot of trees and rivers, and all of it needs to be painted and winterified, if that is a word. So that's it for this week. As always, join the conversation in the comments below, and if you enjoyed the video, please like, subscribe and share. And if you want to keep up to date with weekly content from this channel, please tap the bell notification icon. So until next week, stay safe, keep gaming, and of course, keep rolling high.